Okay. So do we have any questions? I don't think I saw any outstanding questions before we start. Um, there was just the one from Natalie asked about the band. I'm doing a lot of like band around your waist kind of stuff, and there's going to be more of that coming up. So if you need help with like figuring out how to make that happen, I think it's in your just in your bonus workout for this week, but it'll show up a little bit more. So I take one of those TheraBand things and loop it through the handles of my other band. So it's kind of like a band in a band, and I wrap it around. You could also use a belt or a scarf or something like that. But if you need help trying to figure out getting creative with doing all the things at home, let me know. All right, so today is going to be all about running form and fault. If you submitted videos, you should have received an email from me either last night or today with your like breakdown. It may make a little bit more sense even to you after we go through this. I'll kind of like go through some of the logic behind what I'm looking at and why I'm looking at it, and like building the connections that way. I tested out the presentation just before now, and some of the animations I put in aren't really working, so I might have to go back and forth and boo technology. But let me pull up my screen and just like type in the chat if any questions come up, or just unmute yourself and feel free to ask. Check my audio is using the right. Yeah, okay. One of the recordings the other week or so ago, I was using the wrong microphone and it sounded all choppy, but I think we're good today. All right. All right, so you've seen this image a bunch of times already. We're mostly looking at the time where your leg is like on the ground, that full stance phase from heel strike to toe off, because that's where the majority of the like quote unquote energy leaks will be. So from heel strike to mid stance, we're absorbing and we're loading. And then from mid stance to toe off, we're propelling and rebounding. The idea behind this is we're looking for, like I said, energy leaks to make sure that we can capitalize on as much momentum moving forward, and also leaking energy in the system is absorbed by your body, which is what leads to injuries and pain and that kind of thing. And all the while you're stabilizing. So all the parts are connected. So we need a good landing for a good loading. We need good loading through mid stance for a good propulsion forward. And then we need like good propulsion forward for the, yes, it is helpful to see it. Like you'll get a little bit more and more of it every time. So my purpose of saying that you need this for that and this for that is that like all the parts are connected, and we may see like a quote unquote fault in your form that is occurring in, for example, heel strike, but maybe has everything to do with how you're toeing off on the other side. So all the pieces are connected. And with that, there's a lot of conversation about heel strike and foot landing position for minimizing loading force on the body and all of that stuff. And while that's true, because when you want that foot to land closer to the body, closer to the center of mass, I think focusing on a conversation just on that piece like misses all of the rest of the stride that actually gets you to that heel strike in the first place. So we're going to look at how all the pieces are put together. And I think even for someone who has a tendency towards overstriding, paying more attention to strength and stability through the middle and minimizing energy leaks there and propulsion forward takes care of that most of the time anyway. And this is just here because I like watching them run, but we can use looking at some of the elite runners and breaking down their mechanics to talk about what an ideal running form looks like, and then go into what you might see as far as fault. So that's sort of how this presentation is broken down. The first part, I'm going to go through all the form cues. And then the second part, we're going to go through the checkpoints and quote unquote problems that we might see. And then what we were doing with our workouts or the breathing or what I would suggest to fix some of those problems. I don't like using the words problems and fix them because we're not broken. We're optimizing our bodies, right? So why we've kind of waited until here. Hold on, I gotta turn off the monitor. There's like songs going off and distracting me. So we've waited till here to talk about form because I think it's all of the like deficits in mobility and strength are what cause the compensations in the running form. In the first place, yeah, compensations to your form could adversely affect the way the tissue loads, and then that sort of goes as a never-ending spiral, but focusing mostly on mobility and strength and position sort of takes care of, in my mind, the running form in the first place. And when I look at running gait, especially with some of you who submitted, and we've already looked at some of the positional stuff, your hip rotation, the toe touch to squat, all of those things are bits of information that sort of informed what I was going to see in the gait in the first place. So it was almost somewhat of a confirmation as instead of completely new information. So the running form principles first. So the first one is don't crack your egg. And I used some of the cues that you guys, that we've been kind of building up over time. So don't crack your egg came from Addie. But we want like a nice forward lean of the whole body. So a crack, I personally believe that the eyes cue where the head, which cues the torso. So if you're looking up, the chest is going to go up. You're going to open your scissors, the open scissors pattern, and then you're losing some of your core. A lot of times this will be consistent with seeing some overstriding as well. And then you can also like look down, head down, shoulders down, you'll crack your egg that way. I don't do a really good job demonstrating this because especially trying to do this on a treadmill, like I just physically can't make myself lean forward that much. It just feels so weird. But we don't want chest up and we don't want chest down. We want that nice stack that we've been talking about that whole time. Don't crack the egg, keep it intact. And what's weird is like multiple times over the past couple of weeks, I've seen running advice, form advice that has gone completely against what I would say in this. Like I saw the other day, someone give the advice like you're holding a tennis ball between your shoulder blades. Like that to me just makes you go, like, no, don't do that. Stay stacked, head forward, and then slight forward lean of the whole body. You obviously don't want to hunch forward, and I think that's what the person was going for there, but I think that cue takes you way far to the other side. So nice stack. The eyes cue where the head and the torso go. This is really important for like if you're running on the treadmill at the gym and the TV is like up above you, like don't look up at that TV. Or if you're running on your own treadmill and then you're looking down at like an iPad maybe that you have rested, like pay attention to those little things. The head cues everything else. Then we want to be tall in the upper body with a slight forward lean. So I look at mid stance to see if we're doing this well. These lines of the ankle to knee and then hip to head should be parallel. So lots of cues. You can just do like lean in. You could talk about tits over toes. I like hankles, hinging at the ankles. There's lots of ways to think about this, but the idea is you lean forward. So you're effectively like moving your center of mass forward so that your leg landing can land more under your center of mass that way as well. So what helps doing this is running up hills, putting a treadmill like on an incline. To be honest, I had to have the treadmill on a 2% incline to get this shot of me running with a nice forward lean. So I do not do it naturally on a treadmill. I don't know. There's something about running on a treadmill that messes with my lean. So if you filmed yours on a treadmill and I talked about your lean, something to consider is like maybe the treadmill exacerbated what we're seeing there. It's possible. All right, so not the last, I don't know why I said last. The next one is the back stride is greater than the front stride. So you're pushing yourself forward from the back, and then you're just landing nicely in front of you. So this is a shorter distance than this, okay? And then we don't want too much push that you're pushing up. So we want forward motion, not upward motion. So there's like a happy medium here. Too short of a stride can also be inefficient. Too long of a stride is waste energy and then will likely send you upward as well. So we want good hip extension before the knee extension, like we talked about with the co-contractions, powering yourself forward with hip extension, not reaching forward with the leg. So oftentimes, like I said, you need good propulsion for good landing. This is where the two pieces go together. If you're lacking in hip extension, likely you're going to reach forward with the opposite leg to like complete that stride. So the two pieces are not separate from each other. And then we want quick turnover. So the shorter that front stride is, the shorter your stance time is, and then you're propelling forward, maximizing that like springiness in your step. So longer stance times are less springy than longer stance times are less springy than these short stance times, and we get these short stance times by having a good propulsion forward with hip extension, a nice forward lean, and then that foot lands close to the center of mass in front of the body. Now, we can also talk about quick turnover in terms of cadence. And this is the way that some people do it, but I personally generally wouldn't worry about cadence unless you have a very low cadence to begin with. So, you know, they say most runners should fall between 170 and 190 steps per minute in cadence. I generally wouldn't worry about trying to increase yours unless you're way less than that, like under 160, even 165, depending on all the other factors, might be okay. So I would say optimize all the other pieces before you start really worrying about optimizing cadence. But it's also just a good, some people like it to just put, I know Carrie's been using it and there's nothing wrong with doing that, using the metronome to kind of keep your step and stay with a rhythm. That's a good thing to try, but optimizing just cadence and then not worrying about all the other pieces, and we'll talk about that when we look at the faults, like is missing something. And the last is, and this mini punches came from Addie as well, you want counter rotation of the pelvis and the shoulders. So pelvic rotation helps minimize the stress of running. When running with the correct amount of rotation, now it's possible to have too much, but by the time the foot strikes the ground, that side of the pelvis is already like rotating back, which actually reduces the impact on your body. You're rotating, that rotation is absorbing some of that stress. So we don't want too much, we want just enough. And then that torso rotation counterbalances that momentum of the legs. So the rotation happens through the shoulders, not the swinging arms. So we'll look at some faults in this before, but later, if your arms are swinging like a ton, that usually is telling me that your torso is actually not rotating and you're trying to make up for it by swinging your arms. If your arms are not swinging at all, that's usually excessive rotation of the torso, and then usually the pelvis as well, and then that's an energy leak. So there's no like perfect arm swing, but there is, you know, too much on either side. And I tend to see not enough rotation. So excessive like swinging of arms, especially even like one side or the other, then too much rotation. But both are possible. And this one I couldn't get a good video of myself doing it because I can't video myself from overhead, but this is a cool video of seeing the rotation from the top. So as you run forward, the shoulders rotate and the arms swing with the shoulders. So full rotation to the right happens at toe off on the left, and then full rotation to the, no, why is my brain like with rotation? Full rotation to, I just stand up and feel it in my own body. Full rotation to the right, yeah, is toe up on the left. So sometimes if you don't have like a good right rotation, that might be that you're lacking that hip extension. It might be a rotation of the torso thing, but it also could be a hip extension in the opposite side kind of thing too. All the pieces are connected. So, okay, here are all of the cues just in one place. So don't crack your egg, tits over toes, lean in, hankles, whatever you want to call that one. Push with the tush and mini punches. No, you don't have to think about all of these things while you're running. And I would argue that even if you did think about all of these things while you're running, your body just may not be able to access the positions it needs to do all of these things up to the fullest extent. And when you're tired, all that's going to go out the window. So it's more about like training your body to do these things as you run. But like, don't get in your head about all of it while you're running and let it take the fun out of running. Okay, so let's look at the different checkpoints. Like I said, I look at mid stance to really evaluate the nice stack and lean forward. So in a good, nice forward lean with a stack of the torso, no cracked egg, you would have nice lines here parallel. In something where you are either looking up, your core is disconnected, your chest is puffed out, those lines might come and meet each other at the bottom. This can also, posture might also be caused from, my brain just, from lack of hip extension as well, core weakness, all those things can go in to play here. And it just may be habit. And then that's where running uphill can really help to gain on that one. And then too much forward lean, and now this wasn't really a great example of it, but would be the lines would meet more up at the top here. So line through the shin, and then they would come together here at the top. And then this one tends to be, you know, oftentimes with a lack of dorsiflexion or ankle mobility, you're trying to lean forward, but you can't lean forward anymore from the ankle. So you're hinging more from the hips. Yeah, oh, and I forgot to mention, this one can be a glute weakness as well here. I tend to see this one a lot when people who have like hip drops, is to hip drop through the mid stance. The pieces are all really connected in there. Okay, and then push with the tush. So we want to not be reaching forward with the front leg like I'm doing here. We want to be pushing us forward, where it does not want to pause in the right spot. This is where the animations did not work because I paused it nicely and the pictures end up behind the videos. It's not helpful at all. Okay, so here you can see I'm extending forward, reaching forward with this leg. So my angle is like out more. That leg especially is not great when that foot lands too far on the front, and then with that knee closer to straight increases the ground reaction forces and puts lots of stress on your hamstrings. Any time we have hamstring stress, I would look first at, is the person overstriding? But then again, why are they overstriding? And then piece it back to the rest of the form. And then ideally, the foot lands closer to the center of mass on a bent knee, and then you're moving forward, not by reaching, but by pushing yourself forward from behind. Now, you have to be careful here. Animation is not my friend today. We have to be careful here when we're talking about pushing with the tush and where is that extension actually come from. So pushing with the tush is moving forward through hip extension. What that looks like when we don't really have it is more of a shorter, just stride in general, and more of a, like an up and down movement. But oftentimes people who don't have the hip extension or haven't loaded that side efficiently through stance to begin with, try to like fake the hip extension. They extend through their back. So it's like this, a lot of movement happening like here at that lumbo-pelvic connection and pushing forward through your low back. So if you are having low back pain while you're running, first look at your stack and your lean, and then make sure that you're not faking hip extension using your lower back. So what that looks like, and this is a subtle difference, but see, I have a like kind of a nice long line here versus here I'm extended at the hip, but I'm also pulled back at the top. Okay, so the forward lean and the true hip extension sort of go together. And then this is just not quite as much hip extension, so missing out on the propulsion forward isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just not the most like efficient stride. Yeah. Okay, and then let's look at I've always known this, but I've never actually videoed myself doing it side by side. It was kind of cool to see. So the arm swing is an indicator of rotation. So is Drew trying to run with me next to the treadmill? The just normal arm swing, and then again, there's no perfect normal. And then if I stop swinging my arms, look how much my torso rotates more than it did before. And then if I swing my arms a ton, the torso doesn't move at all, and it's just through my arms. So it's kind of cool to see side by side all of these things together. And you can have, and then you might see this everywhere when you run, especially if you run around like other people on trails. You can have this on one side. So someone who has like one arm that swings out to the side tells me that they don't rotate well to that side. So my right arm tends to swing out a little bit more than my left because I don't rotate well to my right. So I'm trying to like capture that by really swinging my arm. I'm not doing it on purpose. I'm not thinking about it, but that is sort of what my body is trying to do to get that. And that is something I can't remember whose in the form. I did notice that on one of y'all's as well. So that arm, they act to almost like dampen that torso rotation. We want enough, but not too much. Again, there's no perfect, but you can also notice some differences in this side by side as well. And then the rotation to one side coincides with the hip extension to the other side. And then hip drop. When you run, I'm looking at this like line here. What's interesting is I don't know how I captured a excessive right hip drop because I don't normally have. This is an example of how you can do maybe an example of how you can do a ton of corrective stuff for one side and then end up with something going on the opposite side, because I did at the big before I did this, I have like as part of my pre-run routine to practice shifting into that left hip. And I did that before and I eventually corrected my left hip drop, but then I created a right hip drop. So I've been doing, I don't know if you saw my post on Instagram yesterday, I've been shifting my pre-run positional breathing to do like both sides. So hip drop is a major indicator of stability through stance. So when we're looking at hip drop, bye Amanda. When we're looking at hip drop, what I'm really looking at is how stable are you on that one leg. Some people, and typically in the running world, you look at a hip drop and then you say, well, we've talked about this a bunch of times, that well, that person needs more hip hikes. Get that, do a hip hike, lift that hip, do a bunch of exercises to lift that hip up so that you're not dropping through stance. That's external rotation, a hip hike. I'm not going to get, that's not going to help me. Someone who that might help is someone who doesn't have a lot of external rotation. I have external rotation for days, but I do not have internal rotation. Internal rotation is what helps you load into that leg. You have to have internal rotation to use external rotation through mid stance. So for most of us, I think internal rotation, loading in that leg, shifting into that leg in some like lateral lunges, those lateral hip shifts, a lot of that like lateral hip shifty stuff is what will help in getting internal rotation and working with that hip drop. So the last piece is the feet. When I look at feet, I look for a couple of things, and this is normal feet. This is my attempt at normal. My normal is still more supinated. So you can see my right foot like kind of points out to the side a little bit because I don't pronate that foot very well. But ideally, you kind of land more on the heel and then you go through the midfoot up and off the toe. Too much pronation is falling in towards the side. You sometimes have like the knees coming together. It's a whole kinetic chain up and down kind of thing now, right? We know that now. Sometimes we look at too much pronation and then you just get a shoe with arch support and it fixes all the things, but that's maybe part of the equation, but not completely. And then too much supination would be more like running on the outsides of the leg. So what you can look at here, see with when I'm more supinated, see that foot like crosses the midline versus when I'm more pronated, that foot swings out to the side. There are different things you can look at in the way your foot moves. But you can also look at the wear pattern on the bottom of your shoes. If you've been running in the same running shoes for a while, if you have this red, I took this from my running coach certification thing, and that I would honestly put that red more towards the middle or inside lateral medial border. But too much pronation, you would have more wear on the inside of your shoe. Too much supination, you would have the wear more on the outside of your shoe, and then neutral, you would strike closest to center, but a little bit more on the lateral border, and then through the middle, oops, and then toe off on that foot. So again, up the chain, we look at some signs of overpronation, the knees not together, the leg swings outward, the toes point outward. I personally think that the toes pointing outward excessively is fake supination. And I think I said that on one of you guys' things too, but it's like a strategy to gain a pronation. So you're turning your foot out so that you can push off that toe instead of rolling nicely over the middle of it. So I don't think that is true overpronation. I think that's just your body trying to get internal rotation and pronate. And then signs of over supination, that heel whip crossing over the center, the outward angle of the ankle. People who over supinate tend to roll their ankles. You have lots of ankle sprains where they roll to the outside. That's how I sprain my ankle every single time. So last bit is just putting this all together with running with the stroller. I think I told you guys this at the beginning. I was not super happy with the general, I mean, I wanted to say something more poignant about running with a stroller than even this, but this is what I came down to when doing the research of and then playing with it in my own body. The research actually shows that holding on with two hands most closely mimics natural running biomechanics, which actually was really surprising to me because I had always heard and followed the advice of holding on with one hand and switching. And then when I was like, that doesn't make any sense, but there's several publications now. They put little, like, you know, those little dots on people that they use to make those movies. And they watched them run with the stroller, and they showed that a couple different studies showed that holding on with two hands most closely mimics the natural running by biomechanics. And I think that sort of makes sense because you would have introduce an asymmetry in into the system every time you held on with one hand and then the other. So the two main differences with stroller running though was, and this is obvious, right? If you're holding on with two hands, you have reduced rotation of your torso. They actually did not find that, at least at first, they haven't done like long-term studies, this did not change the rotation of the pelvis, which I thought was pretty interesting. But they recommend, and I agree with this recommendation, is to be sure to add rotational movements in your other training so that you don't lose that ability to rotate through your pelvis. You're always running with a stroller, and that's the only thing that you're doing. Of course, you guys, that's not the only thing that you're doing, so you should be fine. But something to consider. And then the other piece was that holding on and pushing with the stroller increased the tendency to hinge at the hips, like hunch over, versus hinging at the nice forward lean from the ankles, and resulted in a loss of hip extension. So stay super conscious of your stack and try not to like hunch over as you hold on. And then I would suggest practicing that forward lean at the ankles using some drills with a few hill strides, like before and after, if possible. So it's like a muscle memory thing, like remind my body that this is how I'm supposed to run, even though I have this stroller thing that's like stopping me from doing so. So that is all I have about running form. We can talk more about some of the specific things, or if you want to talk about some of the things that I looked at with yours. When it comes to rotation and that connection to hip extension, we're actually going to dig a lot more into that in week 10, because that is like a whole nother conversation that would be too long of a conversation to include in with all of this. But yeah, I always end these things with but yeah. I don't know how to stop talking.
Allison, I'm gonna go. I got a call to deal with, but thank you so much. And I'm not live next week, so I'll just watch the playback. I'm on vacation.
Awesome. I'm actually gonna be. No, wait, is that next week? No, that's week after next. You're gonna be live from Savannah the week after next.
All right. Well, have a good one. We'll see you guys later.
All right. Bye.
I'm trying to think if I had any questions. I feel like when I just scanned over what you sent me because
Yeah.
life. But I was like, oh yeah, this all makes a lot of sense, which I think you also reiterated, like this makes sense based on your patterns. So
Yeah, I mean, I think with this stuff, there's a lot to think about when you run, but I don't think you have to think about any of it when you run per se. Maybe the forward lean, I think that's one that does take some practice. But the rest of it, like we take care of with our strength workouts, and the workouts are purposefully programmed like for that. But yeah, and we'll talk more about the rotation. Did I say anything about your, I can't remember who it was now.
yeah, definitely there was some like limitation.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, you rotated more to one side than the other, but I can't remember
yeah,
which side now.
I think more rotation on the right, but I can't remember for sure.
Yeah. So, and that's again, it could be, I can't remember who I asked questions to. What was your athletes and overhead? That was who I asked questions.
You did ask me that. You asked me if I was limited on the left,
Yeah,
right?
I did.
Um, I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah, because you weren't your torso wasn't rotating to the right, I don't think. So
Okay.
I had your athletes and overhead just like it said that you were full on athletes, but slightly limited in overhead.
Okay.
So struggling rotating to the right sometimes has to do with having like a compression on the left side in the back. You
Yeah.
need to be like move through this side to rotate this way. And if
Yeah.
it's not that, if you can freely, if you have good rib mobility all around, then it's usually a hip extension thing. And then that first to get hip extension, you need to be able to load through that leg. So if you don't have good hip rotation, internal rotation first, it doesn't really make sense to even talk about hip extension yet. I think that's what I'm going to say. But did you do the feet on the wall, internal rotation, external rotation thing?
Yes.
Did you notice any limitations?
I did it with you and I don't remember I remember it being very
Oh,
hard.
yeah. Then you did, yeah, you were internally rotation limited on the left because of, I know that from the thing that I gave you to do.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would all make sense. I think you need to get you, and that's most people like just struggle loading that left side. And yeah, but again, we're working on it already, and I think you've made a lot of progress in like your stack
Mhm.
already. So that was cool to see.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot there, and to the credit, I haven't had any low back pain
Good.
running at all. So to me, that means something has changed
Good.
besides having a baby.
Yeah. Well, your goal was to run, I think you even said like pain free, but you were willing to accept like a 6 out of 10 in pain at
I'll
the
accept
time.
some pain.
How are you feeling now? Like,
I think I feel really good. I think I still have nagging, that lat pain is
yeah.
still there, but I feel like that is like I have had to use I use those pain patches a lot and I've had to use those less.
Okay.
So I feel like that's improving. But yeah, I feel like it's been good.
Good.
Yeah. What the magic is working.
It's not magic. How about you,
It's just
Sarah?
so much more fun to say it's magic,
I know
even though
it
we
is.
know there's science behind it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I sprinkled my little magic dust on you. Magic,
Exactly.
but it took work. You guys put in work.
Well,
Yes.
yeah, it is work, but it's fun work.
Yeah.
Um,
How's that 5K this weekend.
It was great.
You
It
got
was
a
really good.
5K?
Yes, I did intervals, so I was still following my what was that day? It was 3 minutes run, 1 minute walk for 3 miles. Added in the +1 or the 0.1 just to make it the full 5K. But yeah, it was great. It was great.
I love
And
seeing
yeah,
that little finish line and the signs.
my family is so cute. It was so funny because my husband was being so weird. Like the night before, he was like, "So you'll run will probably be about like 40 minutes." I was like, "No." I was like, when I did the 2 miles run walk and then 1 mile walking, I did that in, I think it was like 33 minutes. So I was like, expect to be below 30 minutes. He goes, "Oh, okay." And then the next day he's like, "Oh, can you send me your route? I'm just curious as to like what you're doing." I'm like, "I'm just running around my parents' neighborhood. Like we've walked that route before." He goes, "No, just send it to me." I was like, "Okay." And then what else did he say? I don't know. There was just some like really weird kind of funky things. And then Lizetta did kind of let something slip. She was like, "Oh, you're gonna love the end of your run." Like,
Oh,
okay.
that's so cute.
So, but what's really funny and diminishes it a little bit, but my husband mistimed my run, so I technically ran past. I got to the house and it was just my dad outside. And he goes, "Oh, keep running." I was like, "But I'm done." He goes, "Just keep running." And I was like, Okay." And then I like went around the corner. I did like a little bit of a walk in the cul-de-sac right next to my parents' place. And then came back out, and then I saw my family out there with their signs. And I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna run now."
That's funny.
So it's slightly faked, but it's fine. It still made me cry, so that's the big thing.
Wait, so
Yeah.
was this one of your goals, Carrie, or was this like what was this?
Yeah, so I mean, my goal for the program was to run a 5K. So
Okay.
I'm still working within my intervals. I'm still working towards that. But then it just so happened that one of the people that I followed on Instagram had promoted this Mother's Day 5K, and I was like, well, that day I'm supposed to run walk, essentially 3 miles. So I'll just sign up for it and get a pretty medal out of the deal.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So, yeah. So and then because it worked with the training, with my scheduled training anyways for the distance, just made up for it. And then my husband made it more of a thing than it was, which was nice.
That's really sweet.
Yeah. It was
That's
great.
like
It was pretty good.
dream of mine that I haven't had yet, like where my kids hold signs and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, I would
Have
love.
you done an official race since, I mean, I guess not since your firstborn or your
No,
secondborn, but
no, but
right.
we don't have like,
Ouch.
I was a single mom for a while with my first.
Okay,
So
yeah.
I didn't have any family. So it was always like, if I ran races, I did them on my ex-husband's weekend.
Kind of on your own time, right? Right.
So nobody was ever cheering for me. Or at least not nobody, like not them.
Yeah, yeah.
That was weird to have him come and
Well,
cheer with.
you'll get it.
I mean,
Yeah.
in some relationships, it would be not
Sure,
bad,
sure.
and in ours, it would have
In that one, no.
been.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah. Well,
But someday, although now it's like,
you'll get there. Yeah.
which one of us is going to get to run?
Mm.
Oh
We
yeah.
both run.
That's where, do you have either of your parents close by?
We
The grandparents close by?
they'll close enough to come and cheer. Like my mom has come.
There you
I've
go.
done a Spartan race where my mom
Okay.
and my oldest have watched and cheered.
Mm.
And we plan on doing. I'm going to sign up for another Spartan in October.
Oh,
Nice.
Yeah. I'm
So
excited.
what is the Spartan race?
It
I feel like
is.
I've heard it, but I'm not entirely sure what it is.
So it's an obstacle course trail
Oh,
running
okay. Yep.
race. I
Right.
have a friend who's a trainer who she trains pregnant and postpartum climbers, like rock climbers and all that kind of stuff.
That's cool.
I'm gonna see if she wants to like create a little like Spartan training program
Little-
for moms.
That'll be fun.
I'll test drive before. So I'll do the running part and she'll help me with like the climbing specific.
Yeah.
Because that's where I struggle. Like I can do, there's like monkey bars and like rope climb and all those
Yeah.
things, like they're more technique, but then there's one that's like more rock climbing and you have to like traverse this.
Across. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I I feel like how old was I now? That was like Lisette was only 5. So maybe about 3 years ago, I did sort of a version of that, but it was just a small the running aspect was only, the obstacle course itself was only 5K, and I think the biggest thing that we had to climb was a cargo netting that was like 12 feet. But otherwise, like I don't know what the Spartan race is, but I imagine that it's a little bit more intensive than my woman to warrior that I did.
Yeah, they're
I should
fun.
find those pictures.
But my neighbor, and actually Jets, who is in the mentorship, is my neighbor, and her husband is really into the Spartan races. So
Oh yeah.
there's one obstacle where you have to throw a javelin to hit a target. He even has
Oh wow.
he even has a javelin to practice with.
Like he has his own. Oh wow. Okay. That's a lot more. This was more for fun, for charity.
Yeah, no. And that's why I did him. He's really competitive with them, like in the meaning, like
wow.
compete, like win his age group with them.
Right. Oh neat.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool.
Well, on my last run, I was like, oh, you know what? I should train for a marathon. And then, like, when I'm running, I'm like, I can do anything. And then I like an hour after running, I'm like, I can't even like sit down without having pain or like stand for like more than 2 hours without pain. So no, we're not going to do that.
Maybe someday.
You'll get there. You might get there.
It's impressive what your body can do, and I think that's why I like running so much. Is like you're like doing something with your body, and like you're like, my body is impressive. Like this is impressive, you know?
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, I think especially for me, at least, when I consider how far I've come in how short a period of time, you know, like I was saying on my post yesterday, Luca's birthday was yesterday, so I am officially 1 year postpartum, and now I'm, you know, I'm running essentially, which is pretty amazing to me. So, you know,
yeah, when do you get to officially say you're running again? Like I was like thinking about that.
Yeah.
In my head. I was like, can I say that I'm running again? Like, am I running again?
Yes, of course you are. Do you run? Even if it's for like a minute, so then you're running, right?
It counts, right?
So
Okay.
perspective. Of course.
Okay, you're right.
That's like, you know what? That's like when people, I remember there was a conversation in one of the things that I follow about like calling yourself a runner.
Yeah.
And the simple question was, do you run? Well, sure, I run for short periods of time. No. Do you run? Okay, yes. Then you are a runner. So, you know, it's about keeping that in mind. Yeah.
You're totally right. And I think Allison you've talked about this before, like you're an athlete, like even if you don't, there's just like like some mental voices telling you like, well, you're not an athlete unless you do X, Y, and Z. But all that is bullshit, you know, like it's just a bunch of noise.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Well, I think it really, sorry, Allison, go ahead.
No, I'm working on a post for today about that actually. So this is a good.
Is that right?
I have.
I was gonna say, I remember you posting about, you know, you can be a mother and an athlete, and I think that was what really kind of tipped me a little bit. Was like, oh yeah, like I can. It's not crazy for me to have a coach, for example, or you know, that sort of thing, because it's, you know, yeah, I'm not an elite athlete, but I don't need to be.
Very few people are.
Exactly.
But it doesn't. Yeah, and I think like. Yeah, people see that and they're like, well, elite athletes are the only people with coaches, but cool. I've hired coaches before in my life and I don't currently have one, but well, I sort of do. Although I haven't been doing any of the workouts that she I've been creating the workout for this
for us.
I'm looking forward to doing some other workouts again.
You're kind
Yeah.
of busy right now.
Yeah, yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah, but
Cool.
so the post for today is going to be about how like we need to not just praise PRs. Like we need to praise all the little things, including like choosing to not run when it doesn't serve your body.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
That's
For
a
sure.
good point. You know what I think too, like, so I'm kind of obsessed with Mount Everest. I read like a lot of books about climbing mountains, and I feel
Oh,
like
cool.
there's a lot of overlap there between the mentality to climb a mountain and the
Oh, yeah.
mentality to run, right?
Hmm.
Everything that causes you to ignore your body and push yourself further is like in some ways what has given you some success physically,
Right,
but it's also the thing that will like destroy you if you're not careful.
right. Yeah. So there's always that question is like,
It's like that
okay,
fine line.
do I push now and compromise being able to do it forever, or like
Hmm.
imagine
Yeah.
climbing Everest, there is that point, it's a little bit more life or death kind of.
A little bit
Just
more
a
than that
little.
30-minute run. Yeah.
Forever, maybe only a couple more hours, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like your determination is like, for me, it's an asset. It's always been an asset, but it's also like kind of shitty sometimes because I'm
yeah.
like, you should do this thing even though you should actually not do this thing, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, one of the things that it's really struck with me, like a mantra I used while I was pregnant, was just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
You should.
Because I was always like, well, I can do it. I don't need to like
Right.
ask for help or like
Hmm.
I'm strong enough. But
Yep.
yeah, but
Don't necessarily have to. Yeah.
yeah, and well, and like my ego totally gets in the way, like do as I say, not as I do, kind of coach sometimes because but it also means I totally get the ego thing. Like I'm right in it with you. I went to
Hmm.
we have a big truck, so you have to lift up like almost overhead to get the car seat thing into the truck, and they don't lift
Right.
anything heavy for a while. Like I
Yeah.
took him out to like lunch with friends. He was 2 weeks old and lifted up over the head, and
Oh.
yeah, I didn't hurt myself, but it reopened some of my internal wounds, and I like
Oh,
read a lot, and I was like, this is
oh
not
no.
good. I
Oh.
basically got like super scolded by my midwife and spent 2 days in bed. I'm like, why can't I just do what I'm supposed to do? Because
Yeah.
I'm strong enough.
Yeah.
Man. Women, man, we'll have like open wounds in our abdomen and still be like, let me lift this car seat out. It's fine. No, I don't
Yeah,
need
right?
help.
Just so I can go out to lunch with some friends. Although,
Yeah.
had I not done that and gone out, I would have been, that was like the last time I left the house and like saw people before COVID.
Oh, before
COVID.
COVID.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe it was good you went, just not the car seat part.
And I learned a lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
fair
Mm.
enough indeed. We should read a book about this.
Your ego.
Yeah,
Yes.
we should read a book about all these topics.
I wonder if there is a book about all these topics. There is a book, so I've already read it, so it's not a book we can read together, but talking about Mount Everest climbing and running, that book Endure that I mentioned before
Yeah.
actually draws
Right.
that parallel. It goes back and forth between running and climbing Mount Everest and all the different topics.
Mm,
So I think that would be a cool one for you to
that
read.
would be cool.
I would like that.
Mhm.
I'm surprised I haven't read that yet. I should. Well, mostly, I
Good.
mean,
I don't
it.
think it got like as much traction as it should have. Not
All right.
new. Had never even heard of it until I spoke at like a virtual running summit. I don't even know when that was. Earlier this year, maybe January.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The guy who wrote the book was another speaker at the summit. And I was like, never heard of this. And like you go to his website and it's just his bio and then like a picture of the book. It does not look like it's this
Like a legit.
like legit thing. But then
Yeah.
I read it and then I've seen a couple of
It's-
people posting about it recently too. So it's just maybe it's
Yeah.
a little while to take off.
Yeah.
But it talks about climbing Everest and then distance running in general, but then also it was before well, during the time of the Breaking Two, Nike's push to break 2-hour marathon. Where they took 3 elite marathon running men and then like trained them for a year to try to break a 2-hour marathon and like all the stuff that they went through. He did not break it the first time in the book, but eventually since then he has.
Wow.
So, but there's a documentary about that too. If you want to get it all in an hour. The Breaking Two one at least.
I'm gonna read the book. I need to put it on my list to read the book.
I have so many books on my list that I need to read.
I know.
So little time.
I don't know about y'all, but reading for me is like, falling asleep in the 5 minutes before bedtime, and then the next night having to try to figure out where I was at when I was reading. So
yeah, that's why I mostly do Audible.
Yes, Audible is the one. Yes,
and then I do it on like 1.5 speed to get
more, even more.
more in the short amount of time I have.
I feel like that's something that I should look into.
Audible?
Especially when I start going back to work, because I'm going to end up having about an hour's drive to get to work.
Yeah.
So plus the 12-hour days. I'm not looking forward to going back to work. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it.
When do you officially go back, Carrie?
Well, so I'm supposed to go back on Sunday. But my college, the College of Nurses here, are really backed up in terms of processing their applications because I had to switch to non-practicing and so on and so forth. So I went to switch to practicing thinking like, oh, I'll give it like a couple of weeks. It should be fine. But because of COVID, they're asking even all the retired nurses if they can come back and do, like the swabs and immunizations and so on and so forth. That they're way behind on processing those applications. So when I went to apply, they're like, oh, you should have done this a month ago. It might be a month before you, and I'm like, oh no. So I haven't heard from them yet as to whether I have my license back. And of course I can't go back to work until I have my license. So that just reminded me, I have to call my college after I'm done this phone call to see whether I can get my license in time to go back to work. But
That is stressful.
It is a little bit. That was 2 weeks ago when I had that, and that day was just an off day. Everything sucked. It was just like that one stressful event just like ruined the rest of the day.
I feel you on that.
That was my favorite week last week.
Yeah.
Well,
you had a bit of a rough week,
I was also about to get my period for the first time. Like, when I got
good
on
timing.
like, that explains everything.
Things sort of settled down for you.
While you're being, grumpy. It's like, oh, okay, I feel better now that I know that there's a reason for this.
Yeah, a reason other than just everything else is stressing me out.
I mean, parenting was a huge reason for it too, but
yeah. Has everything sort of settled for you, Allison? Settling?
7-year-olds are not my favorite age. Let's just say that.
Really? Don't say that. 3 is so hard. I'm like, oh, I can't wait till he's 7. Is 7 awful?
Well, okay, 7 in virtual school. I think that I would love him a lot more if he wasn't here all the time. It's a horrible thing to say. I love him very much, but
no. Did you ever watch? Who is it? Ali Wong. She had a comedy special, and I remember her saying at one point, "I need to miss my child."
Yes.
in order to love them, right? Like you need to go back to work, or you need to, have them go to school in order to miss them.
Yeah.
It just made sense to me. And I was like, yes, that's
Yeah.
why I do it.
I think there are
Makes
some
me a better
moms-
mom.
Yeah, there are some moms that don't necessarily, but I'm definitely not one of those moms.
No.
I need to have my own thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Same here, for
my
sure.
own thing and my own space for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And also, I'm
Yeah.
not a teacher. I mean, I am a teacher, but I'm not a teacher of my own children.
Children. Yeah.
Yeah. I was
get
a
that.
teacher but I'm not a teacher of my own children.
Right.
Well, and there's that aspect of it where children listen to other people better
They-
than they listen to their own parents,
Mhm.
right? So in
Yeah.
that sense, like I can imagine being a teacher and having other kids, listen to you better than your own children do, or it being easier to teach other children than,
Oh yeah.
teaching your own children, for
Yeah.
sure.
We go to parent teacher conferences last year with when he was in kindergarten, and she was talking about how well behaved and quiet and polite and everything he is, and we're like,
My child?
what are you talking about? Okay.
I know our daycare sent a picture of my child eating pineapple. I've literally never seen my child eat any fruit or vegetable ever in his whole entire life, except for like pouch one.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
what sorcery are you guys using to get him to eat pineapple?
Yeah. No, I hear ya.
Crazy how different they are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they really respond differently to people. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, I should go, y'all. I gotta finish folding
probably.
my laundry.
I need to eat something.
I need
Do
to
it.
do my workouts. I've been putting them all off for a while, so need to do
Yeah,
my training now.
I just filmed some of week 9 and 10. I'm sweating.
Mhm.
Gonna go
Yeah.
after I eat.
I'm impressed that you have the ability to film yourself doing it properly and then doing it wrong the other ways. Like I was watching those clips of, like the hip drop and or the overpronation and supination, like how you can, even though you know how to do it properly, how you can also do it
Well, I don't think I did a very
wrong,
good job with
if that makes sense.
the
Yeah.
hunched over one. I couldn't do it.
Seems like it would take a lot of brain work. So
Yeah, to do it wrong.
It took a couple
Right?
of a few takes, that's for sure.
Fair.
And to do it right, like I said, like the forward lean one, that
Mhm.
I have not perfected that myself. And so I
Yeah.
sort of cheated and put treadmill on an extra incline to make it look like I was doing it.
Just to make it look nice cheating.
do
It
what
works.
you gotta do.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
right.
have
All
a
right.
great rest of your day.
See you
And
all
You
next
too.
week.
Thanks.
Bye.
All right. See ya.